Hello, listeners. Just a quick heads up. Hostion and I will be discussing a topic that might be sensitive for some younger listeners. The topics are for more mature audiences, so please use your discretion. With that said, thank you for being here and welcome to another conversation with your two favorite immigrant friends.
I like salad. Do you like salad?
Hi, I'm Hostion Ho. I'm living in Vancouver, BC, Canada, unceded territory of Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh nations. I am an immigrant to Canada from China.
Hey everyone, I'm Andrea, coming to you from Victoria, but more importantly known as unceded Akwesasne territory of the Lekwungen-speaking peoples, the Songhees and Esquimalt First Nations, and I am an immigrant from the United States of America. And you're listening to
Canadian Salad.
Canadian Salad. Welcome back, everybody. We're here.
Yay! We are back to normal programming.
That's right. Hi, Hoshin. How are you, my friend?
I am good. It is a new week. It is a new topic, and I'm very excited. Are you excited?
It's gonna get kind of steamy in here. I think.
I don't know. My glasses is all foggy now.
I think I'm gonna need to turn on my fan, even though it's about 3 degrees outside right now.
But inside is hot.
Inside, and why would it be hot, Hoshin?
Because today we're gonna talk about sex. S-E-X-X.
Amazing. We are going to talk about a topic, and it does relate to the immigrant experience, and to all of us actually living in Canada. And I think it's a very good topic that I think we touched this on very briefly a few episodes ago, that you and I are both on very different paths in our sexual liberation and journey. Mm-hmm. And so we're going to dive into why, but this is, I think I will be honest to everyone who's listening out there, it will be a challenge for me, but in a good way. It's a good challenge because this is not a topic I normally talk about unless I'm with the closest of my girlfriends, or there's a glass of wine, or I feel safe with them. So I like that we're normalizing this and we are having this conversation, Hoshin. So thank you.
I'm glad. Yes, I'm glad you feel safe to talk about this here, because I think not all of us, some of us, let's say, that has a good reluctance of talking about this topic with other people, usually because they might feel of judgment and feel some sort of shame, which makes them reluctant to explore more or talk about it.
Of course.
And as you said, we need to normalize this because it's something that we all do.
Mm-hmm.
It's something that we all desire.
I mean, we're all here because it happened.
Exactly. So I think we talk about it so we can all have more idea what it is, how we can approach it, because in a safe, healthy way.
Exactly.
And how you relate to the immigrant experience, obviously.
Because yes, when you come to a new place, there are new opportunities, and we're going to find out how immigration, sometimes the reasons for immigration can be tied to sexual liberation and opportunity to be honest and true to the sexuality that you have as a person. So
exactly. And then in different society, of course, there are also different social expectations for sex, or in pursuit of sex. So for immigrants who are, let's say, came here as a single person, then they also will face different challenges and expectations when it comes to that.
Very true. Yeah. Well, Hoshin, this is going to be exciting. Would you like to share your brief story about growing up and your ideas or concepts around sex or sexuality?
I think it's not a surprise that I was very sexually repressed. Consider I grew up in China.
Okay.
Also, I think it's a stereotype also towards Asian men that we generally very sexually naive or oppressed or conservative, which was true. When I was growing up in China, that's all that it was. The only sex education that I remember that we had was about our body's gonna change, we're gonna have hair, and girls will have period, put on a condom, and STDs kind of thing is never anything more than that. The act of sex, it was never kind of taught in many ways, or how to engage, or the culture of consent. None of that was ever
Yeah.
taught.
Your parents never had any
No,
conversation?
no, my
No?
mom, no, my dad, no.
No?
None of them, no.
Oh,
So it's definitely a very taboo topic in many ways. Even among adults themselves too, they maybe make some dirty jokes, especially among men. But if you really talk about, or having a serious topic about sex, and desire, I think they would be very awkward as well.
yeah.
So then with that kind of background, grew up into adulthood, realizing I have feelings for people, or even feelings for men, that was just so, like,
Yeah.
I had no idea how to
Yeah.
approach it. A lot of my idea of sex I learned from porn. That's
Okay.
one, which is a horrible way to learn
Sure.
that from.
Yeah.
And second is people that I had sex with that have more experience than me, and then they would taught me things. And with my previous partners, obviously, hookups, all of that. But still, I think I still was very much fear of judgment, as I mentioned, and then I definitely suffer a lot of misery that are very unnecessary, because I want it, like I want to have sex, or I have the desire, or I want to explore
Yeah.
more, especially with my first partner. But the thing is, I didn't know how to approach it. I have no terminology. I have
Yeah. No
no
tools or language probably
no,
around
yeah,
it.
I have no language. I don't
Yeah.
even know how to say certain
Yeah.
things for a
Yeah.
thing that I feel like I want, or
Yeah.
even the idea of the language about consent, all of that, or how to say no. Um,
Yeah.
so I definitely suffer a lot of that. But of course, again, through education, on coming to Canada, which is definitely a way more sexually liberated country, I was lucky to be in communities and with friends that had taught me so much. And I read so many books also to kind of help me through that journey. So
Yeah.
to today, that I will proudly claim that I'm a slut.
And I love you and I am proud of you. So that is slut is and we're going to talk about that term too a bit,
Yeah,
and how that is tied, and the negative implications of
connotation.
that
Yeah,
word, yeah, and connotations.
exactly.
So,
Yeah.
but yeah, it makes sense when you grow up in your home and the culture and the traditions and the environment around you. If you don't have those resources and tools, one, you get stuck or like numb or frozen. You don't know how or what to do. But I also think it's very dangerous, because then you are more susceptible to maybe being violated sexually, to
Oh,
not knowing what that consent
absolutely.
looks like.
Yeah.
And yeah, so I think, and that's why normalizing and having this conversation is really, really good.
Yeah. What
So
about you? What is your
yeah.
journey?
Oh gosh. Well,
Well, you
so
don't
I
have
grew
to
up in the
share if you
United
don't.
States,
Yeah.
which, there is more sexual liberation, of course, than in
Yeah.
China, right? And I would say it's about the same as in Canada. However, there are a lot of religious traditions that I grew up with, that there was this idea growing up that you as a female need to be pure,
Mm-hmm.
and your purity and your sense of self-worth and your value is tied up in your virginity before marriage.
Mm.
So I remember growing up with, they call it the purity movement. So historically, it was around the time of like early 90s, when there were a lot more people being open with their sexuality. AIDS was becoming this condition that people were realizing can happen with multiple sex partners, and no one really knew the research around it. So people got into hyper vigilante and panicked, and especially the Western Evangelical Church was like, "Oh no, what do we do with this? Oh, we have an idea: abstinence campaigns." Just stay abstinent, folks. Just if you stay pure, God will love you on your wedding day. And sold all of these ideas that like your sex life is going to be so great after marriage because you've waited this whole time. I remember I had a purity ring. A lot of girls had purity rings that they would
Ooh,
wear to remind
okay.
you that
Uh-huh.
if you were in a relationship with someone, that you you committed yourself to purity. So it was very much linked to this. I will be socially accepted in the church. I will be accepted by the divine, by God, because I've not had sex before I'm married. But it also placed a lot of responsibility on me as a female, being responsible for a man's sexual actions, their purity. I heard this all the time, honey, I like your dress, but it needs to be longer. You're showing too much knee. Make sure you don't show any cleavage. What men love is a very conservative girl, and she doesn't show anything, and God wants that too, right? So if a man cheated on a woman within the church, well, she must have done something wrong. Maybe she wasn't giving him sex when he needed it. Maybe she wasn't dolling herself up or giving herself the attention to her looks the way that she should have to keep him faithful. So it became this package of shame and this package of, you are responsible for a man's purity and a man's actions. No matter what he does, that's on you. So that was my upbringing. And I didn't get married until I was, this is going to be terrible. I'm trying to remember. It's been a long day. We're going on 8 years. Okay. That's
okay.
So,
oh, wow.
But when I got married, I was 38 years ago. Yeah. I was in my mid 30s and I barely knew anything about my own body. I honestly, I'll be very honest, I didn't know that women had 3 holes. I thought we just had 2. I didn't know, right? Because my parents did not talk about it. They always wrote excuse notes to my teacher to get me out of sex education in school. All I read was that just stay pure, stay abstinent. Sex will be great when you get married. And so what that did is it just repressed so much. And that was my journey. And that's just my background in it. So I have a lot of learning to do. I wouldn't say I'm not sure what sexual liberation looks for me just yet, but I do know there is a ton of shame surrounding my body and my sexuality. And I still feel responsible for my husband's actions. Even though we have a very good relationship and we communicate very well, there is still those old tapes and those old narratives that say, yeah, but if you don't follow through this time, he could cheat, and that's on you. Right?
Yeah, that can never not that's definitely not a correct narrative. Also not true.
No, right.
Yeah,
it's
definitely
not
true.
Not,
yeah,
it's not.
But I think from your story and my story, you can also see, even though I would say both of our background are more, sexually repressed. But me as a man, definitely, I did not feel that much kind of like purity, virginity, kind of tied to a value kind of idea.
Yeah, or to another person.
Exactly.
In some way too. Yeah.
I think that's also the difference between men and women as well.
Yes.
That I think in this society, women always bear more restrictions and limitations and pressure when it comes to sex, and men somehow always had a pass.
Yeah, they do.
Even like we just said, the word slut, is usually used towards women.
Yeah. I've never heard anyone describe a man that way. If a man was sexually active and had multiple partners, it was always, oh, he's a ladies' man.
Yeah. Oh, he's the dog.
He's a player.
Yeah, it's a player.
Or
yeah,
he's
that's
the man, like depending on the context or the circle, right? But it was never this like big, huge, massive 4-letter word that became like a curse or a swear to anyone if you were sexually active with multiple partners for men ever.
Yeah. One of this book I like called Ethical Slut. Is a great book. Also recommend everyone to read it. It talks about the word slut. Also, that word should not be used only to women, because of course slut in its meaning itself is a person who likes sex, and it should not be a negative connotation towards it, and it should be used for anybody.
Right. Yeah.
But the book says that. And then when I was in Taiwan, I was talking about this book to a friend, and then the friend asked me what about Chinese name, because he didn't know the English name. So I was Google it. What it says that this book have a Chinese translation version. So I Googled it.
Interesting.
And then the Chinese name is ethical. It's still ethical. The ethical is still translated correctly, but the slut itself, the word slut, it translates to Chinese dang fu, which means slutty woman. So the
Oh,
Chinese translations only
rude.
yeah,
Rude.
still targeted women, the word
Chinese
itself. I feel like if I was
language.
if I was the
Yeah.
author, I would be pissed. I was like,
Yeah.
I was
Yeah.
like,
Like, this is my book. No, you do not. You do not. This
yeah,
is nothing
you
with the
do
book's
not.
about. Yeah. Yeah.
Exactly. My
Exactly.
book specifically said this word should not be only used to women, and you translated specifically to women. I mean, how dare?
Yeah. Exactly. Exactly. Yeah.
So yeah, that is definitely I think we can see the difference here between your experience and mine.
Yeah. And
Mhm.
similarities too. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's why I would even argue that's why maybe I think a man's journey to
hmm
sexual liberation probably is easier
It is,
when it
I
comes to
think.
women, because I think we face less social judgment and pressure.
For sure, for sure.
Yeah.
And there's some other things I definitely want to tap into that a little bit later in our conversation. But yes, you're on the money there. So
Yeah, I think so
yeah.
too. Okay, now that we are already share our stories, I think let's go talk a little bit more about sex. I think we can establish the point that we all love sex. It's something that we all do.
hmm
Maybe except asexuals, obviously, not all
Yeah.
of us.
Yeah,
Um,
exactly.
even though it's something that we all do and we all desire, but I think we can also argue that it's also something's often shamed,
Yes. Yes.
right?
It is. It
Um,
is. If it's
um,
in certain contexts too, right? Like no one is shaming married people for having sex.
true,
Honestly,
true.
like a society
Well,
wouldn't,
Well, if that couple, for example, in many
right?
communities, this married couple like is open, for example, they each have sex
Right.
with outside, I think they probably
In that
will
they would be, yes. But
they would
I guess I'm meaning that more conservative traditional
like only within the
model.
marriage. Yeah.
Yes, yes, yeah.
Yeah.
1-to-1, that's it. Monogamy.
Yeah. I mean, maybe it also depends on what kind of sex they're having. I think if they have something maybe like out of the traditional sex, maybe like a kinky sex, a public sex, they might also be judged.
Sure, yeah, like guys, save it for the bedroom or something,
For
like in a
example,
hotel. Yeah,
yeah.
yeah, sure.
But yeah, to establish the point that how sex is celebrated and how much we love sex, so I have some data there to want to share to everyone.
Okay.
First is sex is everywhere in our media.
Yeah.
Report in 2005 by Kaiser Family Foundation. Sex is on television. 77% of the primetime TV has some sort of sexual content in them. So that means 77% of the time that we watch TV,
Yeah.
we were consuming sex or some
Yeah.
sort of sexual content. And that is 2005. I would only argue right now that
Sure.
number will increase.
Sure.
Yeah. And on top of that, there's a research from May 2022
Okay.
say that there's 85% of people across all age groups consume different kind of porn, all sorts of porn, 85% of us.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think by that two data, we can see like we all either doing it, looking at it,
Right. Or
or
being slowly kind of through media
passively,
conditioned,
yeah,
passively
passively
consuming it,
consuming it.
and even in, I think, older cartoons, the female characters in like older cartoons, at least in the West here, from like it could be Disney, very sexualized female characters, whether it's a squirrel, whether
All
it's
right.
Daisy Duck, whether it's Minnie Mouse. She wears dresses, but not too short, and she wears heels, right? So there is like a lot of sexual themes that run through media, just very subtle. It doesn't have to be
Yeah,
much. But no matter
exactly.
what, we are prone and we are conditioned to consume a certain style and socially, quote unquote, acceptable form of sexuality or what sex is. Yeah.
Yes,
Yeah.
I definitely agree. So, but in this, as you mentioned, in maybe covert or overtly, sex is like selling to us.
Yep.
And yet you might assume that we should maybe less shameful about it, but the fact is that it's not. From your story, from my story, we both
No.
have experienced how it's shamed, even
Yeah.
just to talk about it.
Right. Right. It is. It is. I
Yeah.
think the closest I got to any porn, and I think a lot of women can relate to this, it's like romance novels. Those, honestly, some good Danielle Steele. Serious. It gets steamy. And those books were like this. Now there were some Christian authors that I grew up with that like kind of pushed the envelope with like physical intimacy in the books. And of course, I remember like when I was a kid, I'd read this and I would like reread the page and reread the page and reread because it was something that ignited something inside of me. But again, I didn't know what to do. And I was taught to shame that. So it was this secret closet like curiosity, but nothing was ever done with that, right? But yes, it may not have to be visual. For many of us women, it's written, and we leave our imaginations to fill in those pictures. So
like 50 Shades of Grey was a popular book,
it was, yes, in a
you
movie.
know.
Yep.
And well, movie too. The book I
Yes.
heard is way better. I
Okay.
have not read the book, but I heard it was way better.
Okay.
Yeah.
I see.
But to the shame part,
Yeah.
I think that shame, as we just also discussed, I think especially is way more heavier on women.
Yeah.
I would say. I think we mentioned Hosted a couple episodes ago, collectivism and individualism. In the dynamic.
Hofstede, yeah, for people who, sorry, Hoshin, but for people who maybe haven't heard that episode, Hofstede was a like a what would you say, a cultural scholar who
researcher.
studied, yeah, and he developed these models of comparing cultures to one another. So that's who we're referencing, and we'll include a link to Hofstede. Yeah,
exactly. So one of the dimensions to measure a culture that he used was masculinity and femininity. So will you say a masculine culture or a feminine culture? A masculine culture, which usually tend to be more conservative, tend to be more sexually oppressed culture. These cultures prohibit women to have premarital intercourse, but somehow promotes men to have premarital intercourse. So that is one specific kind of shame, premarital intercourse that is literally targets women.
Yeah.
Yeah. And the standard has, evolved into allowing women to engage in premarital sex only within committed love relationships.
Right.
As of right now, in these very highly masculine cultures.
Right.
As a result, a woman likely to have fewer sexual partners in her lifetime than men. And according to Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, which released the data in 2011, the average 35-year-old woman has had 3 opposite sex sexual partners, while an average 35-year-old man has had twice as many.
I believe it, especially in a more masculine society, because men get the green light. They don't have the accountability. They have that freedom to go and bone whoever they want to do, and they're, but no one's shaming them. Yeah.
So at the end of the day, let's say sex happened, the man gets a green light, not feel ashamed or judged, but this woman will carry these social consequences. Of being judged and being shamed.
Oh, absolutely. It's much harder for a woman to find that liberation, to find that exploration, because one, it's not safe.
It isn't very not safe for women specifically.
Yeah. And two, it's culturally, we're fighting against a lot of the cultural shames, a lot of the negative stereotypes. There was one term I remember, don't be a Jezebel. Jezebel was a prostitute in the Bible, right? There was so much I was taught against, and yet there was so much for men and for other forms of sexuality that people just turned a blind eye. It was like women were just the hyper focus.
But definitely.
Yeah. But moving forward, though, we've talked about how sex is loved, but it's also shamed. Hoshin, could you explore with me like how sex and love maybe can or cannot relate to each other?
Oh yeah. I think we often, especially in the heterosexual world, or in places that may be more conservative, sex somehow is always tied to love or vice versa. Yeah. I personally don't think that is true at all. Like, I don't think love always has to be about sex, because, for example, asexual exists that they don't feel any kind of sexual attraction or desire when they are with someone they love. And sex definitely also not necessarily about love, because this hookup culture happening, also like sex workers, they do just have sex for money. And I think this idea of a sexual connection as an aspect of romantic relationship, we often think it is somehow this important aspect of it. But I would argue that it's actually usually not, because relationship breaks not often because of sex.
And I think some relationships do feel that sense of separation without sex. Depending on the person, sex is that very intimate building action that two people will do. I've just understood that for some to connect on a deeper level, that sex is also a way to connect as opposed to just having a conversation or hanging out with them on the couch,
I
right?
agree. I mean, sex does bring some level of intimacy, of course.
Mm-hmm.
I also personally believe that if I have some sort of connection with someone, sex usually tend to be more intimate and tend to be more enjoyable. It's because I have that kind of level of comfortability with them. But I don't think sex necessarily has to be for the other, because if we talk about sex in sense of relationship, that means sex is relationship focused. But I think sex also is self-interest focused kind of function, is also for self-pleasure, to boost your self-esteem kind of aspect involved. It doesn't necessarily always have to be about pleasing the other or building a connection.
Sure.
And because of that aspect, I feel like sex and love doesn't always have to be related to each other.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I mean, it can be when in a certain context.
Sure.
That's
Yeah.
how I see it. Yeah.
Sure. Yeah.
Yeah.
I would say too that I think we alluded to this earlier, but I think masculine societies or the patriarchy has really made it difficult for women to not only explore it, but it's also exhausted us. So
Yeah.
so many of us women who might have careers or we are parents, we are going 24/7. We're
Yeah.
exhausted. And there has been a lot of research shown that a woman's sex drive really tanks after having kids,
Yeah.
really tanks. And one of the reasons is lack of sleep. And
Mm-hmm.
so at the end of the day, some of us are just exhausted and we don't have the desire simply because we're tired, simply
Mm-hmm.
because the world that we're in says this is how you need to operate because you are a woman. And if you're not staying at home with your kids, you should be working. And if you are working, you need to pursue a traditional family to help our economy, right? So there's all these expectations. And I feel like for just for myself, I am tired.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, I honestly want to put on my cozy pants and my sweater and I just want to like
Lie
curl up on
down.
a pillow and lay down. I don't want anyone touching my body, like people have been touching my body and talking to me all day long. And this is something that I know men don't necessarily understand because and this isn't all men. There are a lot of men who are the sole caretakers but the other piece too is that in a patriarchal society, women are the ones held to reproductive responsibility.
Yeah. Oh,
Right.
yes.
So it's not like I think I'll just explore maybe different sexual partners. It's like, no, I've got to make sure I've got not only the IUD, I need the birth control, I need the chastity belt, I need all the things to make sure that I don't get pregnant because guess what happens? I'm going to be left with that decision if I get
Yes.
pregnant, right? A great book that I have only just started reading, but I highly recommend. It's called Ejaculate Responsibly, A Whole New Way to Think About Abortion by Gabrielle Blair. And I love this quote, but she says, ovulation is involuntary, ejaculation is not. Meaning we have to release our eggs every month. And it's only 3 days. It's 3 tiny, puny days. Okay. Whereas men don't have that natural release that we do.
Yeah.
It's voluntary, right? It's like, I want to do this, I'm going to do this. But yet women are held to those responsibilities as a production or as a result of sex. So
Yeah.
it gets really complicated, I think, for women.
Yeah.
At least for me. I won't speak for all women, but
But I think that's a great point also to put in the discussion of sex and love, or in this sex and romantic monogamy relationship, Because in the long run, couples will face these kind of sexual changes, maybe because of kids, maybe because of body changes or aging, or both of your desire for sex or frequency for sex will definitely slowly mismatch.
Yeah.
And then I think that's the time most couples have to face the reality if there is a mismatch there, and how they can resolve that as well. Because
Right.
love is not the answer for sexual desire, and sexual desire is not necessarily also the answer for love too, of course. Then
Right.
I think that's the time to have a serious conversation how it's going to do. And
Mm-hmm.
then in the book I mentioned previously called Ethical Slut, you also mentioned a lot of alternative relationship models like polygamy or open relationships and all of that. That kind of open relationship polygamy is very common in the queer community, but I think nowadays more and more heterosexual couples also slowly looking into these alternative relationship
Sure.
models because
Mm-hmm.
they are slowly having conversations about sex, being honest with their own desire and their needs.
Yeah.
And especially for women, especially that what you just mentioned about your body changes and your responsibilities, I think
Mm-hmm.
is definitely it guarantees a very honest conversation.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, it does. And I think it starts to reframe how you think about sex, because sometimes sex for me is something that I'm afraid of because I don't want to get pregnant.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like I'm just like,
Yeah.
no, let's not. I'm I'm so tired. I can't do another person in this planet. I just, and so I think if we had a more balanced society, maybe that liberation could come easier. And I think it is, to your point. I think we are having more conversations, like you said, about sexual liberation, about what are those alternatives in relationships, and both sexually, but also regarding intimacy.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah. So like when talking about sexual liberations, I think it's also important to discuss why. I guess we kind of mentioned it a little bit
Yeah.
for desire and all of that, but I think we'll need to go deeper. We need to sexually liberate it because, of course, we all still live in a sexually oppressed society. If there's no
Yeah.
oppression, there's no need for liberation as well, right?
Sure.
There's this quote I really like, want to share by Alan Giami from an article called Sexual Liberations and Sexual Revolution. The quote starts: the acceptance of sexual misery was seen as the basis for submission to authoritarian ideologies. The sexual revolution was thus based on the notion that the struggle for sexual liberation is a powerful political lever for social emancipation.
Mm,
I love that quote because it talks about
yeah.
that if we are not on the journey to sexual liberation, means we submit ourselves to these authoritarian ideologies. We
Yeah.
are being a slave of what is social construct that has been, forced upon us.
Yeah.
Because I think
It's true.
it's important to know what you're feeling, what you want, especially when it
Sure.
comes to sex. Sometimes people say, oh, that's not something for me. But when you say that, you have to realize whether this is something that you can have because the shame, the social pressure, or is something that you don't want at all.
Mm-hmm.
That's the
Yeah.
difference between oppressed and liberated, for me at
Right.
least. Yeah.
Right. No, it's true. And that's a hard question to ask, especially if you have years and years and years of shame narratives that are living within your own body. It's a real wrap around traditional perspectives when you hear different perspectives, maybe from a religious context, or even when I moved to Canada, I remember getting my student permit,
Yeah.
and at the very bottom of the paper, it said allowed to work less than 20 hours per week, cannot work in childcare or daycare, and then I can't remember the term, but cannot work in the sex trade or
Yes,
sex
something like that. Yeah.
occupations. I
Yes.
was just like, okay, it just felt so random that you go to school, you don't have sex, you know what I mean? and so, but this is something that I've learned, that for immigrant sex workers who do come to Canada for that liberation, for that space to find the capacity to have work that's valued, that's protected,
Yeah.
as far as like workers' rights, protection, access to medical aid, those kinds of things. But there is this silent struggle of immigrant sex workers in Canada because it wasn't until I think recently that Canada actually criminalized buyers of sex.
Yeah.
But
Kind of, yeah.
still, there are lack of protections for women. And actually, I read in one article that it said that actually criminalizing the buyer actually creates more unsafe situations for the sex workers. Because again, there's no laws protecting them. There's nothing around women who are choosing this profession. I think there's a great article, we'll link it. It's from eGale. I think I'm pronouncing it right. It's a Canadian organization for the rights of 2S LGBTQI people and issues. But they put out this really, really great paper. And it's a research brief. It's got loads of research just around sex work in Canada. But the reality is that because it's prohibited by criminal law, immigration law, and municipal bylaws, that many times women sex workers are still the brunt of a lot of abuse, of a lot of criminalization. People will file police reports on women who do choose this profession. So it is something that Canada needs a lot of work on, but it is something that people from other parts of the world who are more sexually repressed and don't find the ability to explore their sexual identity, whether that be queer, whether that be open relationships, look to countries like Canada, the UK, the US, to say, I want to express myself in a way that I can. And if I have the economic means, I'm going.
Yeah.
And I'm never turning back.
Yeah. I think in many episodes ago, we also talk about Canada is a LGBTQ migrant haven. So
Yeah.
because Canada legalized gay same-sex marriage 2005, also have one of the highest ratings in sexuality equality. So
Yeah.
that's why many people do come to Canada for that specific reason.
Yeah, for sure. And it's also very, very interesting that I think within immigrant communities as well, Canada, because it is more open and it is more expressive, at least sexually for individuals, I think there's a change in the narrative for first generation and second generation immigrants.
Oh,
Where,
absolutely.
right? So there was a paper put out. It's called Context. It's Sociology for the Public. And their argument basically is that in their survey and in their research, a lot of first generation immigrants to Canada are much more very traditional sexually, right? Man
Mm-hmm.
and woman, that's it, right? Or
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
you have one partner for the rest of your life, right? But where your second generation immigrants are going to have some of the traditions of their parents, but they're also going to be exposed to these new and open ideas.
Mm-hmm,
And
mm-hmm,
so
mm-hmm.
as you go down those generational lines, those ideas of sexuality and sex liberation and sexual expression, sexual identity, all of those things really start to open up and unravel on themselves
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
because, right? So maybe not immediately, maybe not first generation immigrants. It does take a long time for people to change.
That is true,
I mean,
especially
that is
ideas.
something, yes, especially ideas. And I think especially generational trauma, it might be generational oppression, it might be generational shame, especially within your sexuality.
Mm.
This is a journey that I'm on, and I don't know when I'll arrive to, and I don't even know what liberation looks like for me.
Mm.
But I think having grace for yourself, and even if you have these knee-jerk reactions towards the ideas of sex or sex workers or the word slut, it's in many ways it's like, okay, why do I have that? What is it that is causing these reactions? And then being able to be more curious, more
Yeah,
open, and having those conversations, because this is, like you said at the very beginning, this is something we all love doing and we all experience, and we all are here because sex happened, like we
exactly.
can't get away from it. It's never going away, folks. It just isn't. It's natural. It is part of being a human.
Exactly. So I think it's important now that we have so many reasons why we have to fight for sexual liberation. I think we also need to tell us how can we get there.
How can
You
we
know,
get there? I mean, have conversations with Hoshin and I.
Listen to this podcast over
Listen
and
to
over again.
podcasts, yes. Yeah. And I think it is just with anything that we talk about, any topic we talk about on our podcast, we're always saying, have a curious mind.
Exactly.
Right? I may not understand this.
Yeah.
I may not agree with this at this moment in time, but I can still be curious about it. I can still take a step back and listen and watch and learn. Right?
Yeah.
Because and I think that's how we do that. And not only with other people, but also with ourselves.
Yeah, I agree. And I think especially in these situations like that, or in conversations like that, you feel uncomfortable. When you are uncomfortable, that's the moment you have to step it out. That's how you push
Yes.
yourself out of your comfort zone.
Yeah.
If this conversation making you uncomfortable, keep doing it.
Lean in.
Keep
Yes.
pushing it.
Yeah.
Talk about it. No matter how uncomfortable you are, you keep doing it. And then maybe after the conversation, sit with yourself. Why were you uncomfortable?
Right.
What was the reason? And then having this conversation with yourself as well. Where my uncomfortableness lie? You know, where can I go further to conquer this uncomfortableness? Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And there are great groups and organizations. I know there's an organization here called Peers Victoria, and they are a nonprofit that actually has these conversations on their social media posts. Like you can even passively consume information, very educational about sex workers, about the rights of people who are choosing this profession, and what we can do as citizens of Canada to make sure that those people are protected just as much. They do a lot of great articles and posts about debunking a lot of the myths around sex workers and around the societal biases that we all carry with us. And so there are some great organizations that you can lean into and just observe and engage with. You don't have to read a scholastic, massive article that is
paper.
Yes, that weighs 50 pounds, right?
Exactly. So to sum up, be curious and go explore, push yourself, push through those uncomfortable moments, have conversations, and be kind to yourself, especially. Maybe you're not there yet. Many of us are still in the journey. And, talk to us or read about it. There's a lot of books. Like Andrea recommends some books. I recommend some books.
Yeah.
So,
and we'll link a lot of these in our resources on our website, canadiansalad.ca. They're always there. Like we put out a lot of links, folks. We do some serious labor for y'all. So you need to check it out because there is a butt ton of links on there.
Exactly. It's canadiansalad.ca. We did a lot of research for you. You know, if someone want to write a thesis, a paper on a certain topic that we talk about, they can just go to our website and done.
Oh my gosh. Yes. And we filtered these resources too. It's not like we're just going to yahoo.com.
No, we look into whether are they credible. It is like a real
I took
research.
a Yahoo quiz and it says that most of us are dogs in bed. What?
I know. Oh my God. We should get praised.
Exactly. So it's Canadian pop quiz.
Yes, now we get to the Canadian pop quiz. This is the most fun and easy part. I know we're all looking forward to it. I don't know whether you are.
I am. I know I'm going to get the answer wrong because the topic is totally I miss Chastity Belt Cave woman over here. So but we'll see. But yes, this is the point in the podcast where we quiz each other on a topic, on a question that neither of us are prepared for. Would you like me to go first, Hostion?
Yeah, please go first.
Hey. In what year was the first brothel established in British Columbia?
Brothel? Oh,
yes.
I didn't know there's a brothel in British Columbia. Oh my God, didn't do that research.
The first one.
I am shocked.
What year?
Oof.
Or what city? Maybe we can make that easier for you. What city?
Burnaby?
Well, close. I mean, Vancouver. So kind of.
Okay, Vancouver. Okay.
Yes, Florence Mackenzie came to Vancouver in 1894 to set up a brothel, which was actually openly conducted in a designated area in Chinatown. It was actually the first red light district near DuPont Street, Gastown, I believe is the location.
Okay.
Yeah. If you want to look it up, go to Forbidden Vancouver Walking Tours. They're a tourist organization that does these walking tours through downtown Vancouver, and they highlighted Madame Florence Mackenzie and her brothel.
I didn't know that. Wow, you
Yeah.
found something that I completely
Yeah.
blind on. Good job. Good job.
Thank you so much.
See, I learned something. Yes, I learned
You're
something.
welcome. Okay. Hit me. I'm ready.
Okay, you ready? Okay.
Yes.
So, based on the newest data, 2023 data published by World Population Review,
Oh no.
what is the average numbers of sexual partners that Canadians have?
Ooh, 1.45.
You think average Canadian have 1.45 sex partners during their lifetime? Really?
I mean, you're talking to, again, Chastity Belt Cave Lady. So okay,
Think
I'll
about
guess.
sluts.
Okay.
Canada is like very sexually liberated, you know.
Okay. 10.
Very close. Good job.
What's the average number of
Ding,
sexual
ding, ding, ding,
partners?
ding. It's
Is it 10?
10.7.
10.7.
So yeah,
So
you are very correct.
I
What?
love the 0.7. It's like, okay, from where? Like the neck down? Is this from like the
It's
right
average
finger to the
number.
left? No, I
It's
know.
average number, of course.
But
because-
10.7 partners. I'm just imagining
So-
the 0.7 partner.
Yeah,
What they
maybe
look like. Do they have a
but
head? I don't
maybe
know.
sometimes they don't wear a face mask. You don't see the face. That's why.
That's true.
Or maybe
That's true.
just upper body stuff. They don't do
The
no
purity
body
sheet,
stuff.
you know, the hole in the sheet.
Yeah.
Have you ever heard of that?
Glory holes is what I'm trying to say.
No, you just put a hole in the sheet and you make your sex so pure that you just have a sheet. This is a running joke in like very conservative circles, but yeah, you just have a sheet with a hole in it so that you don't see the other person. You just do it, boom, done, and that's it.
You know, there's a name for it, right? It's called
Is
glory holes.
Glory holes. Wow.
You never heard of it?
Why wasn't that my quiz question? No.
What is glory holes? Is a quiz question.
I would have been like, I don't know, the heavenlies when a cloud appears in the shape of a donut. Yeah. So, well, thank you. I didn't know that. 10.7, folks.
You got the answer correctly, so you won.
Oh,
Ding, ding,
well,
ding, ding, ding.
only because of your second. Yeah, you gave me another chance. Anyway, you're very, very nice.
No, 10.7 is correct. So yes, good job, good job.
Thank you. So, well, this, Hoshin, what do you want to share with our listeners when our next podcast is going to be, or do you want me to?
Oh, the next podcast.
Yes.
Our next podcast is something that I'm always very fond of to study.
Yeah.
Yeah, because I was very surprised to know that it's actually a thing.
Yeah. So
it's reverse migration.
Yeah. Stay tuned to our next episode. But thank you for this journey. And we hope you can have healthy conversations with your family and friends, just like we did today.
Exactly. Talk about sex. Yes. Be a slut.
Let's talk about sex, baby. Let's
you
talk
go,
about
girl.
You and me.
Anyway, we'll see you next week.
Yes. Okay. Take care. Bye.
Bye.
Canadian Salad is written and produced in British Columbia, Canada by Hostion and Andrea McCoy. Theme music is by Naver Avetyan from Pixabay.
This has been a good Drinklin production.